Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Haraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. Thank you. Okay. So we're starting a more practical topic now. So it says in the Torah like this. En motzi'in ha'esh lo min ha'etzim v'lo min ha'avanim. The rule is, right, you cannot make a new fire on Yom Tov, whichever way you want to do it, right? Whether it's, you're using wood or stone. V'lo min ha'afar, and also not from the ground. V'lo min ha'mayim, also not from the water. כגון שנותרים מים בזכוכית צחה. For instance, if you put water into a glass, right? Can I get a shemesh next to the sun? ונדלק בה, and then it gets lit up. עושים פחמין, ואין נופחים במפוח, מפני שדומה למלכת אומן. Okay, let's try something else. So, yeah, that's the story. So we cannot start a new fire on Yom Tov. Says Bet Yosef here, משנה בפרק המבין כדי יין. It's over there in the Mishnah, Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. ומפרש תמה בגמרא משום דקה מוליד. Right, so why is it that we cannot make a new fire? Because he's making something new. והרמב"ם כתב בפרק ד' שהטעם מפני שלא הותר ביום טוב אלא להעביר מאש מצויה. So the Rambam explains like this, that the reason why you can only take from an existing fire on Yom Tov, אבל להמציא אש אסור, but to make a new fire is forbidden, שהרי אפשר להמציא אותה מבערב, because you can do that beforehand. כתב הרב מגיד, says הרב מגיד, שטעמו מפני שאין זה כביצה שנולדה. He says the reason is because this is not like a egg which was hatched, which was laid, I'm sorry, that was laid, שהאסורה, it's forbidden, שהרי דבר זה אינו ראוי לעצמו, because this thing is not fitting for itself, אלא לבשל או להפות, or just to cook or to bake בו, with bake with it, ונראה שאם הוציא שמותר להשתמש בו. So he says, right, that, but however, if he did put a new fire, right, you can use it. ולא אסרוהו אלא מפני שלא היה לו להוליד. The reason why they forbade it is because they shouldn't make something new. כיוון שאפשר לו מערב, because he could have done it beforehand. והטעם הזה כתב גם כן הרשב"א, Rashba also writes this reason. וכדברי רבנו, like the two, what can I know? That's the end of it there. Okay, good.
I do have a question, Rabbi. So for the 2 days for us, we need to use the Eruv candle, correct?
Yeah, so you buy like a memorial candle, and which lasts for 2 days, and this way, if you need to take from there, to light something, you can take from there.
Because we do light candles on the one of the Yom Tovs, the one prior to the end, or we only do it once.
So yeah, so what you're asking, in other words, if you have 2 days of Yom Tov in a row,
Yes,
the question is, do you need to light candles for the second day, right?
for both days.
Yeah. So the truth is, right, that the custom always was they lit for both days, but here's the thing.
Mhm.
So nowadays, the thing is that if your electricity is on, so you have light there. You don't really need to light for the second day.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because you already have light.
So we don't close it like if it was Shabbat, like we don't do.
No, you shouldn't close it. There's no reason to close it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a good question what you're asking. But the truth is, the custom is to light for both days, you know. But honestly, you know, if you have already electricity, there's really no reason to light another one. There's no,
Okay.
you
All
know,
right. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
it could be even considered, by the way, like a blessing in vain because, you know, you already have light and you're blessing on light. So what's the purpose of that, you know? So therefore, you know, probably better not to do it. But you know, a lot of people, probably most people, they do it though. You know, like religious people, they do light for the second day.
So it's like also
Uh,
like Havdalah, like the Havdalah that we do
yeah,
in Shabbat. No.
right. So Havdalah is something else because you know, it's already like Shabbat is over, but here now it's still Yom Tov.
Okay.
You know, so it's not really the same thing. Havdalah you're gonna make the night after.
Yes. Yes. I was
So yeah,
we need to light something similar to
so,
the like the
uh,
Havdalah
yeah. Well,
on
you
Yom
know, as a friend, you know, I tell you, I recommend to you, you don't need to light a second day.
the second day.
Unless it's dark in your room, you know. If it's dark there, so then you should light for sure. Yeah, no question.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, yeah, yeah, because that's the way to do it, you know. But as I said, you know, a lot of people they do light. What can I tell you? You know, I just don't think it's necessary at all. Yeah. So, but you know, as we said, right? If you are lighting for whatever reason, whether it's the first day or the second day, you should have like a candle, memorial candle, you know, to light from. You know, let's say you want to cook something, right? You know, so if you want to light your gas and cook, or light your oven and cook, so you should take from an existing fire. That's the way to do it, you know? It's not so easy to do that, by the way, you know? Practically speaking, not so easy, but I mean, you know, if you could, you could. Yeah, can't tell you, you know, it is what it is. If you have, you know, the plata that goes on, you know, with the timer, so then you don't really need to anyway light a fire so much for cooking, maybe. Depends, you know, depends on your situation, you know, whatever. But if you want to cook something for the second day, so then, you know, you should take from an existing flame. That's the way to do it, you know. But now the question is like this, right? What about if you don't have an existing flame? You know, what do you do then, right? Let's say you don't have one. Let's say it went out, you know, or you know, let's say right, it didn't last, you know, whatever, you know. So then you got nothing. So, or let's say you forgot to make a flame. What do you do then, right? We're gonna talk about that. Right,
Didn't we
in
talk
this,
about that already?
I'm sorry. Ah, did we?
It wasn't that earlier, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about that.
Well, what
Why?
did we say? Now, if you remind me, then
I
you
think they
know.
said that they already tell you it was permitted, but the rabbi said not to do.
Right, right, right. So but we're talking here now, but practically speaking, you know what I mean? What do you do? You know, if you don't have one,
If
right?
de oreta is permitted, then wouldn't you be allowed to do it?
But the rabbis forbade. You know what I mean? So then,
But
what do you
in,
do?
in a time of great need and it's required for the seudah, it would be permitted.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there. But you know, let's hold on for that. I don't think we spoke about this yet. You know, this particular issue, how to solve that problem. You know, but I will try to give you a solution. You know, as you know, I'm a very kind rabbi, so I'm gonna try to give you a way to solve the problem. I'm not one of those nasty rabbis, you know, who tries to say everything is forbidden. So I'll try to work it out for you. So let's just, first of all, let's get the basic idea right here, what's going on, and then we'll get to that issue, right, that point there. So as we said, right, so yeah, that's the way to do it, you should have something, you should have an existing flame there in your house. So what do? I buy, a memorial candle, right? And you take it from there. It happens to me, by the way, sometimes I have to tell you, I have a memorial candle, and I want to take something from there. And when I try to take something from there, it goes out, like the candle goes out. So it doesn't help me much sometimes, you know what I mean? So, we do the best we can, you know what I mean? What can you do, right? Yeah. What do you call it? The practical ladies, the ladies who are very practical. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but you know what they do, right? In the Jewish world, religious world, they make everything before Yom Tov, so they don't need that, everything is already done, it's already made, so they don't really need like a new flame to cook more, but just makes life easier if you prepare things beforehand, But I'm not telling you that's halakha, that's not halakha, but just practically speaking, it just makes life easier. Whatever. This way you can enjoy the Yom Tov, instead of having to cook on Yom Tov, you can enjoy it, and do more enjoyable things, whatever. Some people like to cook, no problem. If you want to cook, no problem, All the power to you. Right? Okay, so anyway, right, let's go on a little bit. So yeah, so as we said, right, the main reason why we gave that the rabbis forbade this to make a new light, to make a new flame, is because of molid, right? So, molid means you're making something new, which is a rabbinical prohibition, right? As you said, it's rabbinical, yes. Okay, very good. So, but there's ways to get around this, there's ways to play around, there's ways to get around. Okay, so anyway, right, as we said, then he goes down to Bet Yosef, then osim pechamin, right? It also says don't make coals. So what does this mean? וגם זה משנה שם ברש"י, משום דהבו כלי לצורפי זהב. והר"ן פירש תמה מפני שהוא מכבה, right? So, okay, interesting, right? So here, he's telling you, right, don't make coals. So what does it mean to make a coal? He's not talking here about lighting the coals, like to make a barbecue or something. That's not what he's talking about. So then what is he talking about? So what he's saying is like this, right? That in those days, they used to do at home what now the factory does for you, before you buy it, right? When you buy, charcoal, right, in the store, it's already made for you, the coal. So what does that mean? They already like charred it, with a flame, so it's ready to use. But if you don't, if they didn't do this for you, what do they call that, right? That company, whatever, that makes the coals, right? Whatever that company's called. So then what you got to do is make it yourself. How do you do that? You take like wood, right? And you char, the wood with the flame and mix it into coal. So telling you right here that don't do this on Yom Tov to make coal. Right? Today, as we said, right, we don't really do this because they already did it for us, so not really a big issue. But anyway, right, we have to know what we're talking about. Uh, so uh, so the Ran, right, he gives here, right, gives one reason why you can't do this. Ran gives a different reason. So Rashi says that this is like the goldsmiths, do this kind of thing. It's like labor kind of thing. Um, but it's not from the Torah, right? You're making something like, uh, and then the Ran says a different reason. He says the reason is because you're extinguishing. So what does that mean? In order to make the coals, right, you need to extinguish the fire and just, leave it like that, so extinguishing is also a prohibition on Yom Tov, right? Again, extinguishing, sometimes is allowed, depending on what the purpose is of you extinguishing the flame. But here, the Ran is saying that for this purpose, they didn't allow that on Yom Tov, right? To make charcoal. Okay, good. So that's the story there. Then he goes on, right? And also, right, another thing he says not to do, the tour, right? Not to, what do they call this when they blow that with the, when they blow with that thing, to do the fire. You know what I'm talking about? Like, It's like this utensil, that blows the flame, whatever. I don't know. I forgot what that thing is called. Anyway, right? You're not supposed to do that. So what's the reason why? Because, right, it says here, uh, it resembles labor of like it resembles like professional labor, something like that, right? So that's the reason why they forbade that. Right. It's like, the Smiths do this, the Smiths have this thing, and they use it. So, it resembles like a certain kind of a labor kind of thing. So therefore the rabbis forbade that. So these are two things which are forbidden, as we said, to make charcoals and to make this thing, whatever things that thing is called. Forgot the name. Anyway, so right, כתב אדוני אבי הראש ז"ל, מפוח קטן של בעל הבית. Okay, so let's go back to the tour. There's a little bit more there to read. So says the Rosh, yeah. So כתב אדוני אבי הראש ז"ל, says the Rosh, that מפוח קטן, if you have one of those small little blowers, whatever they call that, with flames, as we said, shel balabait, which is, for home use, shara, he says it's allowed. Why is that? Because, it's not a professional one. It's like, just a homey one, right? Whatever, right? For layman, the layman's version, right? Uh, so, shara, delo dame de mlechet oman, because it doesn't look like you're a professional, it doesn't look like you're doing professional labor. ולא לנפחים ולא לצורפי זהב ומי הוא, אין להקל מדלא אשכחן התרה. But he says, nevertheless, right, even though it's allowed, but he says, you know what, better not to be lenient regarding this. אלא בשפופרת מכלל תאכול מפוח אסור. So it's only allowed to use שפופרת, right, which is like a tube. Instead of using that thing, you use a tube instead, right? We don't have this today, this kind of thing. Anyway, right, כשעושה האש נותן עליה הקדרה, צריך להיזהר בסידור העצים ונתינת הקדרה עליהן שלא יהיה דומה לבניין. Oh, so no, okay, well, let's go back to Bet Yosef. We'll come back to this. So it says Bet Yosef regarding what the Rosh said. וכן כתבו גם כן תוספות, that's what it says in תוספות, also בסמ"ג אלא אשר תוספות כתבו בסוף דבריהם, מיהו העולם נהגו היתר. So תוספות says, right, the custom is to be lenient regarding these blow things, whatever they call those, right? Right? Yeah. I'm sorry?
It's called a bellow.
What is it called?
Bellow.
Bellow. Oh, okay. All right, sounds good. So anyway, right, he says that Tosfot says the custom is to be lenient regarding this. על ידי להפכו מלמעלה למטה. So Tosfot says, right, how are they lenient? Because they do it with a shinui, right? They do it in like an abnormal way. They hold it like upside down, whatever, something like that, right? Instead of holding it right side up, they'll do it upside down. Shinui, right? Whatever. ואומר הרב פרץ, it says רבינו פרץ, יש לדחות מה שפירש בדלו מפליג דשמא העדיפה לדכולה בשל אומן כמיירה. So Rabbeinu Peretz seems to disagree with the Tosfot. It doesn't allow this. Okay, interesting, whatever, right? Okay. So it seems like the Tosfot is like a minority opinion here, right? It seems like most people don't allow this, to use this utensil, bellow, right? The bellow with a shinui, right? Okay, whatever. Anyway, we don't use them today, so no big loss for you or for me. Right? כשעושה האש נותן עליה קדירה, צריך להיזהר בסידור העצים ונתינת הקדירה עליהם שלא יהיה דומה לבניין. תאמר רבי יהודה מדורתא מלמעלה למטה שריה, מלמעלה אסור. So another thing he says right here, he mentions, right, the tour is that when you're putting on a pot to on the flame to cook it, in those days, right, they didn't have those grates that we have, that we have with the gas, right, the gas stove. They were using like they were using wood, so they would like pile up the wood and place the pot on top of the wood. This is the way they did it in those days, so he's telling you, right, that You have to be careful the way you arrange it, because it could be that you're transgressing the prohibition of building, because you're building like a structure there, to place the pot on top of it, a structure of wood there. So what is he saying here, right? In order to in order to avoid this problem, what do? Do it in an abnormal way, right? Don't do it the normal way. This way, you'll avoid the problem. So we'll see, right, how that's done. Right? According to what it says here in the Talmud, how do you usually do it, right? Usually what you do is first you put the wood and then you put the pot on top, right? So now what you do is put the pot, and then put the wood, like the opposite order. That's like a shinui, different, right, abnormal way. So that also avoids the problem, So here's now a good time, right, to tell you what to do if you don't have a existing flame, right, to light from there. So here also, right, what you should do is do it in the abnormal way. Light a new flame in the abnormal way. This is the way to do it. Just like these things are done in the abnormal way, same thing with the flame. So how would you do that, right? How do you do abnormal? Right, so there's all kinds of tricky ways to do abnormal. For instance, I'll give you an example, right? Usually, right, what do? You rub the match right on the matchbox, right? So if you want to do it abnormal, what you do is you rub, you move the matchbox and leave the match like still. That's like the opposite way, You know what I'm talking about? That would be like a way, abnormal way to light a flame, for somebody who doesn't have one. Something like that.
Would it be permissible to have a goy?
Good question. Yeah, are you allowed to tell the goy to do it? So the answer is yes. And the reason is like this, right? That because since the prohibition is only rabbinical, so the rule is, you're allowed to tell a goy to do a rabbinical prohibition in time of need or time of mitzvah, right? So this is exactly the situation. That's exactly what we're saying. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't be allowed to tell a goy to do it, right? Either you tell a goy to do it or you do abnormal way, one or the other. So you're good. You can still do what you want to do, right? Whatever you want to do. Okay, good. So let's go on a little bit. וכן ביאתה וכן קידרה וכן פוריה וכן חביתה בפרק המביא כדי יין איתה להי מימרא דרבי יהודה. So, right, this applies not only to a pot, but it also applies to anything you put on the wood, to cook it or to bake it or whatever it is, right? You should do it in the abnormal way, right? Change the order, whatever. So that should be no problem to do it that way, By the way, that's what I tell people. They always people have these questions. Nowadays, right? I've posted about this. Like let's say on Shabbat or Yom Tov, let's say, right? You're in a hotel, right? So you have like keyless entry, right? You have those cards, whatever, those magnetic cards or whatever it is. So how do you get into your room, right? If you don't have a goy, if you have a goy, you can tell a goy to do it. That's for sure. But if you don't have a goy, let's say, right? So how do you do it? Also, in abnormal manner, try to do something abnormal there. Same thing, all right. The opposite order or the opposite something, do something a little bit strange, right? Something abnormal, right? But when it comes to these kinds of things, right, one thing which is not considered abnormal is to do it with your left hand, because some people think, that doing it with your left hand instead of your right hand is called like, shinui. That's only with writing, by the way, when it comes to writing. If you write with your right hand, so shinui would be like to write with your left hand, something like that, right? But here, regarding these kinds of things, doing with your left hand is not called really shinui, abnormal way. So you got to think of something better than that, right? That's not good enough. Why is that? Because sometimes, people do things with their left hand, it's not exactly so abnormal. But when it comes to writing, somebody who's right-handed will not write with his left hand, right? He never does that. So that's abnormal. Okay, good. So, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to those things, but good to know these things. Very practical. You need to know sometimes what to do. So yeah, I could tell you even more, by the way, about that issue, with the magnetic cards, but I'm not going to get into the whole depths of it now. It's not necessary. Whatever. So let's go on. Let's go back to the tour, right? And because we have more to cover there. So it says like this, right in the tour. כשעושים מדורה גדולה, עושים ד' שורות של עצים כאין ד' דופני התיבה. So it says when a person makes a big fire, right? Like a bonfire, whatever. So he says what they do is they put like 4 rows of wood. I guess in those days that's the way it was. Today, we don't really make bonfires so much. It's not really a big thing, by us. So right, so it's like 4 rows of right, like v'notanin alea etzim, and we put the on top of that we put the wood. כמה שלא יעשה הדפנות תחילה, אלא אחד יאחז העליונה בידו, ואחד יעשה הדפנות תחתיהם, שלא יהיה דרך בניין מדורה. Right, so in other words, here also, right, he's telling you, right, more precisely, like what to do exactly. As we said, right, the proper thing to do is if you want to put pots, and cook on top of these bonfires, whatever, right? So what you do is somebody holds the pot, and on top, and then right, the guy comes, right, some other guy, and puts the wood under it. So this way, it's like the abnormal way, right? The opposite order. Okay. So then he goes on. So he says, מדורה העשויה מעצים דקים מותר להסיר מהם כל זמן שלא אחז בהם האור. So he says, if you're making a fire, right, with like twigs, like thin pieces of wood. So you're allowed to remove from them, he says, all the time that you want. As long as the fire didn't catch on to it yet, you can remove. וכן הקדרה, כששופטין, so this is also the pot, when they place it on top, אותה לא יניח אבנים תחילה, וייתן אותה עליהם. Also the same thing here, right? It says, in other words, if you're putting a pot on top of, stones, right? And your stone becomes like, the stones become like your base, whatever. So here also, right? First you gotta switch the order here. Don't put the stones first, put the pot first, and then do the stones. Why do we care so much about this? As we said, right? Because this way you're not transgressing the prohibition of building. So again, right, same thing, that you should hold the pot in the air, right, to somebody, and then another guy comes and puts the stones under it. Abnormal way, the opposite order. וכן בצים כשצולין אותן ומניחין אותה אחד על גב בית, right? So this is also when it comes to eggs, right? Same thing. ויש ביניהם יחזון בעליונה בידו, ואחרות בנתחנה, וכן פוריה רוצה להעמיד המיטה, אוחז קרשים למעלה, ומכניס הרגליים תחתיהן, אבל לא ייתן הרגליים תחילה, והקרשים עליהן בדווקא כשדפנות מחוברות. So he says also, okay, let's see first Bet Yosef. There's a lot more here, material, but let's catch up with them Bet Yosef first. So he says here, regarding, as we said, right, how to do the placement on top of the fire, with the wood or the stone. The Rosh writes this, to explain the words of the Rif. So he means to say like this, right? That when you're making a big fire, as we said, right, you make 4 rows of wood. Four directions, right? In other words, each direction, north, south, east, west. So it becomes like a, like a wall, that surrounds you. And then on top of that, we place more wood, for the sake of the, right, for the cooking. So it becomes like a, like a building, a structure, whatever. So regarding this, he also says, right, that don't make the walls first, and then to put the top, on the top right there, the pot, whatever, because this is the way of building. So he says the same thing also applies here when you're making a big fire. So here, right, we're not even talking yet about the pots, to put the pot on top. We're just talking about there's two levels of wood here, right? There's a first level which becomes like the base, and then there's the wood you put on top for the cooking, So what you do here also, same thing, right? Instead of putting the base first and then putting the wood on top for the cooking, right? What you do is you first hold the top, right, the wood for the cooking, and then bring the base and put it under it. So this is also abnormal manner, right? Shinui. Okay, good. Yeah, so that's the way it works. That's לא have דרך בניין. וכך הם, דיבר רש"י, that's what Rashi says. ורמב"ם כתב פרק ד' העושה מדורה ביום טוב. So Rambam says, right, that a person who's making a fire on Yom Tov, טוב כשהוא עורך את העצים, when he's arranging the wood, he says, אינו מניח זה על זה. So don't put one on top of the other, right? In other words, in the normal way. עד שיסדר המערכה, until you get the whole structure. because it looks like you're building, אלא או שופך העצים בערבוב, או עורך בשינוי, right? So it says there's 2 options, right? You can do here. Put like the wood in like in a scattered manner, which is also abnormal. In other words, not in a very organized manner, right? Everything nice and even, right? Put it like scattered, like disarranged. That's one way to do shinui. Another way, as he says, right, as we said, to put the opposite, order, right? First the top and then the bottom, instead of doing the bottom and then the top. קיצר, מניח עץ למעלה, מניח אחר תחתיו, ואחר כך, ואחר תחתיו ואחר תחתיו, עד שהוא מגיע לארץ, וכיוצא בזה הם דברי הריף. So, right, it's sounding like the riff, basically, the same thing as the riff, which is what? Instead of going from bottom to top, you're going from top to bottom, right? That's the way. Opposite order. כתב הראש פירוש לפירושו, so Rosh explains his words a little bit, right? Whatever. כשעושים מדורה גדולה, עושים 4 שורות של עצים, right? As we said, right? The words of the Rosh, we already read them. וכמו שכתב רבנו בסמוך, like the two already wrote. Okay, very good. So that's it, right? We're done with the Bet Yosef. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Okay. Gotta bring it up. Yeah, so says Shulchan Aruch like this. And motzin esh lo bina etzim v'lo bina avanim. Right, as we said, you're not allowed to make a new fire on Yom Tov, right? Whether you're making it from wood or from stone, whatever it is. V'lo mina afar, and also from the ground, whatever, any kind of technique. V'lo mina amayim, right? Also not from the water. V'eno sin pechamim. Also another thing, as we said, you cannot make like new coals, right? As we said, to make charcoal. Then nofchim b'mapuach, and also right the bellow, right, to use that thing, the right to blow with that thing. Ela b'shvoferet. So you can use a tube, he says, which is like some kind of different type, probably more amateurish kind of way of doing it. V'nahagu heter b'mapuach shel baalei batim. So he says the custom is to be lenient when it comes to right the bellow, which is the household one, right, not the professional one. Al yedei shinui. So, in other words, two things, right? One is you're using a household one, and also you're doing it with a shinui, right? With an abnormal manner. So that's already good. So how do you do abnormal? As we said, right? You turn it upside down, and this way, right? You're doing the abnormal way. So we don't really use this thing, in our houses. We don't have that today. But anyway, right? That's what he's saying. So let's see the Ramah here. Says the Ramah, ומותר לכסות האש בכלי או באפר מוכן. אם אינו מכבהו, right? So he says you're allowed to cover the fire with a utensil, right? Or with dirt, he says, right? As long as you're not extinguishing it. So you can cover it if you want to cover it for some reason, but don't extinguish. If it extinguishes it, it's prohibited to do that. So, by the way, you should know that when it comes to extinguishing, even a partial extinguishing is forbidden, So if you extinguish part of it and part of it got left, still lit, it's still called extinguishing. So, just you should know. So it says, "V'davka letzorech Yom Tov Rishon, aval letzorech Yom Tov Sheni asur." So it says, but you can only do this for the needs of the first day of Yom Tov, not for the second day. So what does that mean? As we said, right, you cannot prepare on the first day for the second day. So if you're covering it on the first day to prepare for the second day, it's forbidden because you're not allowed to prepare, right? As we said last week, the only thing you can do preparing is just verbal, the preparation, but not physical preparation. That they cannot do that. Okay, so then, right, says the Shulchan Aruch furthermore, right, "Ha'oseh medorah b'yom tov keshu orech et ha'etzim eno maniach zeh al zeh." So, right, if you're making a fire, as we said, like a bonfire or whatever, so you don't do it the normal way, right? In other words, going from bottom to top, right? When it comes to arranging the wood, so forth and so on, right? So why is that? Because it looks like you're building. So in other words, it's telling you, right, that it's not really building actually, it looks like you're building. So the prohibition is only rabbinical, because if it was a real building, right, then it would be from the Torah prohibition. So why isn't this really called like real building? It's because it's temporary structure. It's not really something permanent, right? It's just for a little while. So it's not really something from the Torah. Anyway, the rabbis forbade that, right? By the way, this is similar to like this is the reason why we can't open like a umbrella, right? On Shabbat or Yom Tov. This is the same reason why. Because you're making like it looks like you're building, it's like you're making a tent. So this is the reason why they forbade to open umbrellas on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Same thing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So all of the malacha that we're not supposed to do is because of things that were done during the building of the Mishkan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
Right.
if we're allowed to do something that or the
By the way,
prohibition.
just to I'm sorry to cut you off, but I don't think it's the building of the Mishkan; it's the function of the Mishkan.
Okay.
In other words, just okay.
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
thank you. The things that like the prohibition on building is, I think you've said before, and you've explained that it's for things that are permanent. But wasn't the Mishkan in and of itself meant to be taken down and put back up?
Yeah, it's a very good question what you're asking. The truth is, that the Mishkan stood, for hundreds of years. So in a sense, it was like, in other words, it could have stayed up for a long time.
But wasn't the nature of it to be something that was portable?
It was portable, but you know what it is, right? If you look, let's say, for instance, right, I'll give you an example. If you look in the history, right, in the Sefer Bamidbar, of all the places where they stopped the Jews, and they encamped there, right? Uh, so some of those places they stayed there for like a year or two. You know what I mean? And sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month. So that's already called permanent. You know what I mean? In that case. So what's temporary? Temporary means it's like not even 24 hours. But the Mishkan usually stood up for more than that, right? You know what I mean? So, yeah. But something like, which is up for a week, that's for sure called, permanent. You know what I mean? That's okay, whatever. Anyway, right? So getting back to Shulchan Aruch. So it says here, right, as we said, do the abnormal way. Ela, right? So it says, however, one second. Yeah. So it says, Ella, however, oh, shafech, I'm sorry, oh, shafech etzim be'erbuv, right? Or, right, as we said, either you can do the abnormal way, or you can do like in a scattered, disarranged way, right? Oh, orech beshinui, right? Kitzad, so now he explains, right? How do you do it? Maniach etz lemala, so what you do is, right, you put something on top, somebody holds it there, because you can't, just place it on top, it'll drop. So so somebody's got to hold it up there, And then, right, while one guy is holding it, the other guy will come and place under it, some things, right? This is the abnormal way. So in other words, we're going from top to bottom, right? Instead of going from bottom to top, as we said. That's the way to do it. Good. Until what? Until you get to the ground, right? Oh, there you go, right? We got to the ground. We're all there. Okay. So same thing when it comes to a pot, right? First, put the base. Instead of doing the base first, hold the top, the pot first on top, and then put the base. Whether it's wood, right, the base, or it's stone, it's all the same, right? What difference does it make? אבל לא יניחנה על גבי אבנים וכן המיטה. So this is also regarding a bed, right? If you're doing like, setting up a bed, same thing, do it the abnormal way, because otherwise you're making like a structure. אוחז למעלה ומכניס לרגליים תחתיהן. So what do? Right, somebody holds the mattress on top, right? And then comes another guy, right, and slips in the legs at the bottom. Afilu betzim, right? Even it says eggs, right? Same thing. לא יעמוד אותם, לא יעמיד אותם שורה על גבי שורה, עד שיעמידו כמו מגדל. So it says, right, also, like, in other words, if you're arranging eggs, right, you should do it again, right? Instead of doing from bottom to top, do top to bottom. So in other words, if you're like putting, arranging eggs, like, you're making making it into a like little tower, a little pyramid there, pyramid shape, right? So do the abnormal way. Anything like that, it says, right? Whatever it is, right? It needs an abnormal way, right? By the way, the rabbi, Maran, my rabbi Bashal Maran, he has, he wrote about the issue of, like using Legos, right, on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So, can a child play with Lego, even though he's making a structure? So there, right, the truth is that it's allowed. You don't have to do in the abnormal way, Legos, what do you call it? Because there, right, really, the Lego is like totally, it's totally temporary. In other words, it's like, it doesn't even stay for 24 hours, like, so it's very, very short time. So therefore, right, there's all kinds of things that are written there regarding that, why it's allowed. But anyway, right, Lego is allowed. So that we can permit for the children to play with Lego. But when it comes to these kinds of things, which are more practical things, it's not a toy, right? Something which you actually, right, you want to build it and leave it there for a while, even for a few hours, whatever it is, right? So then, it's not allowed. So we have to do with the shinui. So says the Rama, וכן שולחן שיש לו דפנות המגיעות לארץ. The same thing also, the Rama says, same thing also applies to a table as well, right? But that's only if the walls of the table, right, come down to the ground, which is not like our tables, right? Because our tables just have, legs, right? And there's air in, right? So there, it's not like, what he's talking about here. צריך שינוי, it also needs a שינוי. אבל מותר להושיב השולחן שלנו על רגליו, but he says our tables, right, as we said, which are different, right? In other words, the walls don't come down to the ground. ואין בזה משום בניין, so therefore there's no prohibition of, right, building there. So by the way, that would also mean that our beds are the same as well, because our beds, they don't come down to the ground, right? Some of them maybe do, I don't know, but the ones that I've seen usually don't, right? You have like those legs, you have a mattress on top, so there's like airspace, under there, whatever. So it doesn't come down to the ground. So therefore, that kind of bed would be allowed, just like the table. So you wouldn't have to do it with a shinui, right? So shinui is only required when you like have, that it goes down to the ground, right? So it looks like a building, Yeah. אוקיי, ויש אומרים זה אפילו מגיע לארץ כל זמן שאינו צריך להעביר שתחתיו שרה. So right, then he brings here another opinion, the Rama. Some say, he says, right, that even if it goes to the ground, as long as you don't need the airspace under it, it's allowed, right? And by the way, that's the way we paskin, that if you don't need the airspace under the structure, so then it's allowed to make it, even without a shinui. So therefore, right, generally, right, our beds, and our tables, we don't need the airspace under it, so therefore it's allowed. That's another reason why it's allowed. Okay, so yeah, B'ezrat Hashem, let's see, before we stop, maybe we can take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. Maybe explains a little bit better this whole issue with the beds and the tables. Let's see what we can get there. Right, so Mishnah Berurah explains the reason why it's allowed if you don't have it doesn't go to the ground, is because then you don't really have, right, any partitions there, and so it's not really like a structure. It's not like a building, so therefore it's allowed. Okay, let's go on a little bit. Let's see what else he says here. So it says Mishnah Berurah here something interesting, right? That if it comes to within 3 tefachim, right, of the ground, it's like it got to the ground. So 3 tefachim is like 24 centimeters, So if it's that close to the ground, it's considered like it got to the ground. It gets to the ground. Could call that lavud, right? It's almost there, So it's considered to be on the ground. Okay, interesting. Then he says, what else we got here? Okay, that's about it. Okay, so I guess B'ezrat Hashem, we'll stop here. We learned, Baruch Hashem, some good things today, tonight. So B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue, and so thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. And Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. See you tomorrow.
Kavod
Laila.
Harav, thank you so much.
God bless.